Happy Halloween. You've reached a fright-tacular edition of The Signal Watch. I'm your ghost, Ryan Steens. Most episodes, we discuss movies, television, comics, and more. But for Halloween, we're asking you to join me and my co-ghost, Spooky Simon, for a horrifically fun 5 episodes of Halloween frights. This year, we're talking horror sequels, the movies they made to catch lightning in a bottle one more time and maybe make some cash along the way. And we'll try to put it all in perspective. Stay terrified. We're gonna try to make this weird. Happy Halloween and welcome to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me this final spooky day of our podcasting Halloween year is...
Hello, it's me again, joining you again for a final Halloween session before we break out the Christmas shit, I guess.
Right. So the theme, if this is the first one you've listened to, and I'm sorry if this is the 5th one you've listened to, the theme this year is sequels to great horror movies. Whether that sequel's good or bad, we're doing sequels to great horror movies. And can
I just say, the amusing thing is, until last week, I thought we were doing surprisingly good sequels to classic horror movies. So I was slightly different in what I was doing.
Well, I think what ended up happening was I didn't really want to watch bad movies.
Which is most sequels, let's be honest.
Right, yeah. And so we ended up kind of going, well, what do we actually want to sit and watch, for a month of screenings?
We had a very small list of good sequels.
Right. I mean, if you go and Google horror sequels, of course, you get all of your Friday the 13th movies, and you get Nightmare on Elm Street, and you get, we did Halloween, and
yeah,
there's a bucket ton of those, but everything, there's Slumber Party Massacre 8, and all this. Well, I haven't seen, I don't know if Slumber Party Massacre 1 is considered to be a great film, to begin with.
We're talking about Christmas films. I was looking at Christmas films the other day, and with horror, I discovered there's, I think, 7 Silent Night, Deadly Nights, which is a terrifying prospect thinking about watching those.
That's all we're doing this year. That's going to be the theme. 7 weeks of Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Our brains melt. Before we dress up as Santa Claus and start killing people, probably.
What did it? What drove them to this madness? Sir, it's right here on the podcast.
We proved the link, finally.
Yeah, I've never actually seen any of those. I would look at them at the video store and just keep.
I want to watch a good film instead.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, but the downside is I've never seen Black Christmas.
Well, there's several now, isn't there? Because there's the original 70s one.
Yeah,
which I've seen, and it's okay. I don't think it's as good as its reputation merits, but to give it credit, is kind of the first slasher, I think, before Halloween. And then there was like a remake in the early 2000s, and then wasn't there like a really woke remake Last Christmas that everybody hated?
I have no idea. Maybe.
So I think there's been, that might be kind of interesting to do all 3 and compare them, I guess, at some point. Although I don't know if we could stand it.
I was going to say that's a lot of the same story over and over. And ever since we did Stuart and I did King Kong, every time someone proposes something like that, I'm like, it's like touching the third rail. I'm just like, oh man, It's rough watching the same story over and over and over. Whatever the differences are. I mean, we watched like 5 King Kong movies, but for this, we watched, because if you go back and look through the list, we watched The Fly a while back. Simon had used it as his What Is Love movie. So if you missed that one, head on back, find it on the list. But
that's very true. I mean, the Fly is definitely probably still my top 10 favorite horror. Well, not even favorite horror movies, pretty favorite movies, to be honest. I'm a huge fan of it, and I'm always going on about it, and I probably watch that every couple of years. The Fly 2, which we're doing today, directed by Chris Wallace, who did the effects and won an Oscar for the first one, is the sequel that came in 1989, starring Eric Stoltz, Daphne Zuniga, and having a lot of fun as the villain, Lee Richardson. And I must admit, when I first saw this, because of course I sought this out and poured through my movie mags back in the day when I was about 14. And, and I was a huge fan of the first one with Jeff Goldblum. So when this came out, I immediately bought it with my hard-earned pocket money. And I'll be honest, I was disappointed. First time I watched this, I was like, that doesn't match up to the first one. But with nostalgia goggles and time, every time I've watched this over the last, I guess, 30 years now, I've kind of liked it a little bit more. Yeah.
So I saw this in the theater. My brother and some friends were going. We were kind of on a kick of seeing kind of light horror stuff like Lost Boys and trying to think of what else is it, Flatliners and that kind of stuff that was coming out at the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I haven't seen the first one and I haven't seen the Vincent Price movie. And they're like, our understanding is it doesn't matter. And that's true.
Not really.
Yeah. So,
there's some nice connective tissue if you have seen the Goldblum one, the first one. But yeah, really, it kind of tells you everything you need to know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was never lost. I knew exactly what was going on, except for the fact when we walked out, they were like, oh, that lady who died at the beginning was supposed to be Gina Davis. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
So I was very upset that they killed Gina Davis, fake Gina Davis. But
you see what Gina Davis turned the part down is. You want me to get killed in the first scene? Okay.
Well, they didn't even use her voice in the found footage. It was
I found something as well that was funny because I watched the teaser trailer the other day, and it's actually like the heart bleep machine going, I guess, like at the start of the film.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all you see, and it's her going like, oh, something's wrong, and then you hear like a baby crying and buzzing and stuff. And it's like saying, birthing soon, The Fly 2. But on the monitor, they've got her as Ronnie. And I'm like, wasn't that her nickname? And her actual name's Veronica. So even the makers of the film have got the wrong name on the machine for the patient.
Yeah. It's an interesting film in that and this is an overly generous comparison, so just bear with me till I get the sentence out. They much like Alien to Aliens, they didn't want to do something that was going to draw direct comparisons, and they didn't want to tell the same story.
Yeah.
So they do something completely different that exists in the same universe and with some of the same characters.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is a nice organic continuation. Because, the only thread at the end, the first one really is, well, what would happen if Gina Davis was pregnant? Well, actually, she was pregnant because she was trying to get an abortion, wasn't she? And he kind of like kidnapped her. So, I guess at the end of the first film, she is pregnant. We know that. And then I think, we kind of discussed that there was all those deleted scenes at the end of the first one where she dreams she has a fly baby, or she has a normal, or it jumps forward and she's living with status and his false hand and leg with a normal baby. which test audiences hated because that was like a betrayal of Jeff Goldblum. So that, they take that and they kind of run with it. And of course, rather than I was watching a kid grow up over 20 years, which would be a bit boring. He's got this accelerated lifespan, so we can hit puberty pretty fast and get on with the gory stuff,
Yeah, I mean, kind of anything's on the table for what they could do with this character. And it makes sense to make him kind of this, supernatural genius, kind of the way, his father had been. You can believe he would have inherited that.
I also thought first time I watched this as a 14-year-old, give me a bit of credit because I was 14. I went, wow, I'm impressed they got Jeff Goldblum back. And then when I watched the credits, I'm like, oh, they didn't. It's just old footage from the first film they didn't use.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's so the story, if you haven't seen it, is we kind of got you up to like the first 10 minutes of Ronnie gives birth to a baby at this Bartok Institute or corporation or whatever. And the guy, what's the guy's name who was from the first movie?
John Getz as Stannis Barnes from the first movie.
Right. And he's kind of there bearing witness to it and kind of goes away in disgust. And anyway, she dies basically on the table. And so
I'm guessing he gets told that this probably the baby died as well. Because otherwise I'm thinking, well, in the first film, this guy was like a newspaper or magazine editor. Mm-hmm. Surely he'd kick up a huge fuss, but then maybe they've had to sign, contracts where they can't say anything and all this kind of stuff.
I mean, when he shows up later,
kind of drunk and bitter,
Yeah, I mean, he seems to know that the kid existed, and it may have been that this company's going to take over for it, and he has the ability to walk away at this point because he doesn't need to worry about her, and they're going to raise this kid. Yeah. But yeah, like you said, he grows at an accelerated rate. His maturity kind of keeps pace with his physicality. And then he befriends a dog. Things go sideways. Then he's an adult at 5 years old. He's like 20 years old at 5 years old. And I'll
just point out as well that Daphne Zuniga basically has sex with a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
She's a pedo. She's a pedo.
There's probably a series of films we could do like that, like Big. Where you're like, well, that character's technically 5 years old or 12 years old.
Like Tom Hanks in Big and stuff.
Right. So, I do definitely I was all excited about when I was 14 watching this, which was the last time I've seen this movie. I was like, yeah. And then now watching it this time, I was like, no, very, very wrong. So yeah, he meets Daphne Zuniga in the kind of like bowels of this company.
Who's fly fishing? It's a joke.
Yeah. And meanwhile, he gets the teleporters he's trying to figure out how to get the teleporters to work, and then he's trying to save himself. Blah, blah, blah. That's the plot. Yeah. Is there anything I'm missing? You think that's like a major step?
Well, you got like a nice kind of subplot of Lee Richardson. I think definitely is the best thing in this as Bartok, who's only mentioned in passing in the first movie, in the Goldblum movie, as the company and the guy giving him all the funding. And he's on one scale, he's a one-note kind of corporate villain. But I do like how, he's kind of like an evil dad figure. If you see Goldblum as maybe the good dad figure, then, I guess like Lee Richardson is the bad one who's like basically lying to get all these kind of secrets that he can like use to make profit.
Yeah. They do a really good kind of heel turn for the character or twist, maybe 2/3 of the way through the movie.
Yeah. I guess when he discovers that he didn't kill the dog, he didn't put the dog out of its misery.
Right. And then as he starts becoming the Fly, in the last third of the movie,
he kind of hulks out and kind of gets his revenge, really, doesn't he? Which made me think at the end of it, it's obviously one of the many problems I have with this compared to the first movie. is it's kind of got a happy ending. And I mean, you know how much I love an unhappy ending.
Right.
But I'm also like, technically, Eric Stoltz has killed about 5 or 6 people. He may have been mutated when he did it, but he still did it.
And I was kind of wondering, well, who's running the show now? Like it seemed to be this Bartok thing was run by him and maybe had shareholders, but he was definitely the only person kind of running the whole thing. So when he's taken away, like who's making any decisions, and how are they not just calling the police and the feds in, which it seems like what would have happened.
Well, it's very kind of movie logic where there's one head of the company who seems to do everything instead of a board to answer to.
Yeah. And, it's better than TV shows where like people like treat companies like they're a MacGuffin that you pass back and forth. But yeah, I mean, some of that stuff doesn't make sense, and I'll be honest, I kind of enjoyed watching it. It was, it's not,
it's not great, but
not great. No.
It's kind of entertaining.
Yeah. I mean, it's 90 minutes. It kind of knows what it is. It knows what it's got to do. It is not Cronenberg.
It's definitely Cronenberg.
Right. So it just doesn't have the same like pathos to it. They get fairly good performances out of Eric Stoltz. It's about I don't want to be mean. Like I like Daphne Zuniga kind of for what she is. And I only really know her from like Spaceballs and this and like her like 3 seasons on Melrose Place and a few other things. And she's never really asked to like stretch a whole lot from what I've seen. And she's as good as she's ever been in this.
Well, I think these guys also suffer in comparison to like Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis, who are really, really good actors and did a really good job in the original. So you can't help kind of seeing it as a bit of a pale imitation.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. That is where it starts to dovetail with the first movie when you're in kind of, I guess, the back third of the movie.
Yeah.
And it really starts to feel similar and you see the same kind of notes coming up. What I was thinking of was, well, she seems really dedicated to this guy, but she's making a lot of really bad decisions where those were a lot more rationalized in the first movie.
Yeah.
And they did a lot of really good character work. It was like, it got turned into a stage opera or play or whatever. Which
you saw that Gina Davis was very, very conflicted in the first film. One minute she was kind of crying and saying she didn't want to see him again. And then he'd kind of call her and say, he was suffering. And so she'd kind of go back and, and it was very realistic. Whereas in this, it seemed to be almost like, I don't know, almost like an escapade. I mean, what it lost me with a little bit when I first saw it was, you had that great opening with not Gina Davis, and then straight afterwards, it almost turns into the Goonies for about 10 minutes or 15 minutes, where he's a little kid inventing stuff and messing around. And then, really, it's only the second half of the movie that kind of clicks into gear, partly when he works out what's actually going on and partly when he starts kind of changing.
Yeah, I think for me, it kind of clicks into gear. And this is how we decided we're going to start recording instead of just chit chatting beforehand, faithful audience. We were watching the movie and I didn't really remember it all that well. My memories were, kind of the last third of the fly running around. And the dog showed up and I was just like, oh no. Cause I was watching it with Jamie and Jamie has a firm, like, does the dog die rule. And she will look it up to find out what the end of the movie, she has some site she hits. I think it's called Does the Dog Die? And I was just like, my memory is horrible, horrible things happen to this dog. And I was like, we're stopping the movie now. So she went to bed and then I picked it up and I watched the rest of it later. And yes, sure enough, horrible, horrible things happen to the dog. It's a big Muppet, but so you can't, you have enough separation looking at it. But that for me was really when when you first see what happens to the dog is when it kind of starts to kick into gear. But when he finds the dog the second time, and I'm a dog guy, and I've had to put down my own animals, not me myself, like with but at the vet. But I've been in the room with them enough to where, that stuff hits me hard, man. And and I thought that stuff was like all really, Stoltz obviously isn't playing the 11-year-old version of himself, but man, the kid they got, and then if you fully believe the arc of this is the same guy seeing this dog again, he really made that scene work. And the shock after being told, and it's kind of a little bit of betrayal he feels from the company and Daphne Zuniga and all the rest of this, and he kind of puts the pieces all together.
Well, it's also the whole thing. I like how the password ends up being dad, and the whole betrayal he feels with the dad as well, really. I mean, like he says, I loved you. Because his whole life's been a lie, really. So as an audience, I think the difference is, in the first film, we're kind of horrified because Goldblum's slowly losing his humanity, and he has that great monologue about, have you ever heard of an insect politician? Neither have I. Insects are violent and horrible, and we can't trust the insects. Whereas in this, I think a problem I have with this is, and you can explain it away saying, well, he's a more kind of pure breed than his father because it was kind of like it was born into him. But, I feel like even when he turns into the fly creature in this, not only does that look more cuddly, but it pats a fucking dog on the head. And I'm like, oh, this thing should be like, not like, it's almost like he's turning into the Hulk, but he still knows what he's doing. It's still like Eric Stoltz. And I'm like, this thing should be like, just like, not just killing the bad guys and not just, kind of doing the right thing and like, patting dogs on the head. It should be like totally unpredictable, really, but it isn't.
It's funny. I remember when I said to Jamie before we started the movie, I was like, my memory of this is walking out of the movie with my brother and his friends and going, that wasn't a horror movie. That was a superhero origin story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the Hulk thing is dead on, man. I mean, you can kind of argue about whether the Hulk's a horror story or not and kind of its original origins, but
yeah,
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, they really changed it. And they wanted to make another monster movie and they did. And I think the puppet looks pretty good that they used. And I especially like it when there's a guy in a suit kind of jumping, like off.
I mean, obviously trying to change it up from what it looked like in the first film. And I get that, but I just feel like the face is like almost too human-esque, even when it becomes a fly, how the eyes are placed and whatever, compared to what Goldblum became.
Yeah.
Because that was kind of
I see what you mean. Yeah.
It's almost like they've toned it down and made it more palatable, so he's not so gross. So they can bring him back, and you won't go like, we don't care whether you bring him back or not.
Yeah. Well, and they show a lot of it. I mean, you can tell what parts of it they were very proud of because it's, let's pour a lot of light on that fly face.
Yeah. They have some great bits, like when he vomits on the guy's face, which you kind of wanted in the first film, but you never got.
Right.
And you're like, whoa, that's what it would be like if that happened,
Yeah. I mean, I do. When I was watching it this time, I was really appreciating kind of like, wow, the makeup in this and the practical effects and the budget they had. You can tell that's why this didn't star bigger people, because that was going to be the focus for this. We're not going to make as much. It's back at this point. This is before the sequels were always bigger than the original film. This is the late 80s. So that was kind of the expectation, and they budgeted appropriately. So you're not getting, I can't think of who another Gina Davis would have been in the era. Maybe, I'm just blanking.
Michelle Pfeiffer or somebody.
Right. Yeah. You're not getting like a Michelle Pfeiffer at this point. You're getting Daphne Zuniga. And you know, people kind of knew who she was. People definitely knew who Eric Stoltz was at this point, but he wasn't, he'd already lost the job on Back to the Future. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
this is a slightly rough consolation prize. I couldn't help thinking as well that because he'd done The Mask before, which is a great film, check it out, with The Mask with I think Sam Elliott and Cher as well.
Oh yeah, I saw it like 35 years ago, but yeah.
Like this dude can obviously sit for hours while people stick stuff onto his face without complaining. So that's probably also why he got the part.
I definitely had the same passing thought when I was watching it. Of he had a lot of experience with makeup. They knew he could tolerate it, and indeed he did. So. I think some of that makeup looks really, really good. They definitely repeated the early era transformation stuff of like his face deteriorating and
kind of like mottling colors and bloating and stuff, and losing his hair.
Yeah, I mean it looks just like what was going on with Goldblum in a lot of ways. And so
this was different because I guess he kind of went into a chrysalis with this one, which was kind of cool. It was different. I kind of like the fact that, when he hatched out, although of course, I felt like it was very obvious and very loud that he was hatching out, and the doctor just kind of stayed there. And I'm like, yeah, he should be running at this point.
Well, yeah. And I don't want to be like, oh, I know how to be a scientist, but I would think they spent, what was it, like 5 years keeping this kid behind glass. When they know it's going to transform into some giant killer monster, that's when they decide they're going to sit in the same room with their back to the thing.
Yeah. Well, custard comes out of it.
Right. It's like, no. You have that thing in one of those like prison chambers, apparently they have, and you have a bunch of guys with machine guns at the ready. Like, I don't know. Why you think you just throw it on a table and wait.
This was also, one of those films where it's I think it's one of the earliest examples of like a company where they have their own security kind of force, who they can't necessarily control because basically the head security guy was Scobie, who's kind of a great hench villain. He's like, fuck it, let's just kill it. He's like Bartok's like, no, you idiots. We spent years on this. Yeah,
the other thing I noticed was, I guess it would probably be by the mid to late 90s, people were all using gigantic 9mm or 45s. And in this one, they're still using the 80s submachine guns.
Yeah.
Like everyone had to have a cool looking submachine gun in this era.
Well, it's Fox. It's 20th Century Fox. I'm sure they had loads lying around from Die Hard and stuff. So the tagline for this was, there was two. There was like Father Like Son, which is pretty good, and there was the Very, Very Poor, I think. So the original tagline for The Fly was Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid, which is actually what Gina Davis says, isn't it? Tagline for this on my video back in the day was Be Afraid, Be Very, Very Afraid. Be very, 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 very afraid. So like not much thought put into that, I don't think. But I think, if the cons against this were, the happy ending, because the happy ending, I mean, apart from the fact that he's killed so many people, he kind of ends up doing what Goldblum was trying to do. And it kind of shows that Goldblum would have survived, but then I guess he would have like killed Gina Davis, probably.
Well, I think they were doing two different things.
Oh,
he
okay.
was trying to swap the genome using the teleporter. Goldblum was looking to blend. He was trying to create one. What he had already done with The Fly, he was looking to do now, including Gina Davis, so they'd be literally one body.
Okay. So he was trying to add more human DNA, whereas Eric Stoltz was trying to swap it?
I think the idea was, like, they have this, the idea in marriage of, like, we're no longer two different people. We're one unit. Yeah. And I think they were suggesting suggesting Goldblum was trying to do that, like, quite literally. Like, we might have 4 eyes and 4 arms, but we'll be one thing forever, you know.
But also, it's like Goldblum had kind of gone insane, whereas Eric Stoltz still seemed to be pretty rational. I mean, even when probably the most weird he got was when he was lying on the couch and he was like, I can see so much more clearly now. You know, took his eye out.
Yeah.
But like, even when he was a fly, he seemed to be like, he knew what he was doing. You know, he was like, start the computer. And I'm like, you know, I mean, I guess like he just seemed more together, I guess.
Yeah, I can't really rationalize it other than he was only 1/4 fly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, but I'm not going to make excuses for a script that went completely in a different direction and did no explaining. I will say I was literally laughing out loud at I have no problem with the fact that the password, yes, I do, that the password was dad, because it's a deeply insecure password. We all know a lot more. I did like how they talked about passwords as this mystical thing of like, it's the secret word. We have to figure out the secret word. And I'm like, you can use password. We all were using password by 1989 to log into things. I remember that.
Well, I thought that was partly because right at the start when he was a little kid and he first met him, he was like, what's the magic word? And he was like,
right.
Because he wanted to be like a magician, didn't he?
Yeah, I didn't make that connection. You're right.
Yeah. Because that's why the guy said, surely it's abracadabra. And he's like, no, that's too obvious. But it's like, yeah, I mean, it was, there's definitely cheesy bits in this. I mean, one of my favorite bits for coincidences is like when he breaks into, I guess, the kind of place with the surveillance place where they've been filming him. And it just happens to play all the most important parts of his life on one video.
Yeah.
So he can kind of catch up in about 2 minutes, you know?
Well, it's the equivalent of the person walking into the last minute of the professor's lecture where they say the most important thing and then the bell rings and then they give the reading assignment afterward.
And at the end, it's like, you know, I mean, he's perfectly back to who he was, if not improved. Whereas Bartok's, you know, horribly mutated. And again, you know, apparently no fallout. It's worked perfectly. So, you know, I guess they just walk into the sunset. But then, you know, somebody must be looking after Bartok. I mean, who puts him in the mutated lab, you know, the holding cell?
Yeah, I mean, they almost treat it like, well, I guess no one else knows what's going on around here. Eric Stoltz, I guess you're the guy or something. Like, I don't know. I don't know who made that decision. Yeah. Because all the scientists who are around are dead at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Security guards all dead. So I guess they're just cleaning up and don't mention anything.
No one's families are looking for them.
This is it. Yeah, I was thinking about Austin Powers, where it's like nobody thinks about the family of a security guard, you know. There's like kid going, when's dad coming home, Mom? You know. So interestingly, so I will say, you know, one of the pros of this though was a great score by Christopher Young, taking over from Howard Shore. So Howard Shore did a brilliant score for The First Fly. And of course, Howard Shore was the go-to guy for horror, and especially Cronenberg horror, way before he did Lord of the Rings, you know. And they got Christopher Young in to do this one, who, you know, had a good pedigree already, because I think he'd done the first 2 Hellraiser movies. But he does, I think, an equally good but different kind of orchestral score for this.
I will be honest, I did not think it was bad. I just thought they were using it like a bludgeon for the last third of the movie.
Yeah.
It got a little heavy-handed for me in some parts. It may have been just my speaker mix, but it was just a lot sometimes when I actually am thinking, wow, the score is really going, is not something I usually think about watching a movie. But yeah, no, I thought it was pretty good, and I'm glad you reminded me. Because I said, "There's no way this is the same guy who did the original one."
Yeah, definitely different flavor. I've actually got both of them on CD, and they're kind of great to listen to because they kind of complement each other. I mean, this kind of bombed at the box office, and it is, I think, the only film that Chris Wallace directed. I kind of really think this is very similar to Joe Alves directing Jaws 3. So Joe Alves was the guy who designed the shark for the first two Jaws films, and obviously did a great job. And because of that, they gave him Jaws 3 to direct. And, I'm not knocking both of those guys because, I just think they're very kind of unexperienced, really.
I mean, for what was really this guy's first feature effort, it's really strong for what it is.
Yeah. I think it ticks all the boxes, it's a solid sequel.
I do remember going to see it, and the theater was, I would say, 80% empty. We were some of the only people in there, and it was, opening week or whatever. Yeah, we just knew this is totally tanking. But you didn't think about, box office wasn't something. The first movie I really remember people talking about the box office on was Batman.
Oh yeah.
And that was just because the box office on that was so crazy at the time.
When we were a kid, it was the only way you could really tell was if a film kind of was on more than a week.
Yeah.
If it disappeared after a week, it was that probably didn't make much money. Whereas if it just kept going, you're that's doing okay.
Yeah. And that's how I knew Supergirl hadn't done very well. I was going to go see this movie and it was just gone.
Lucky escape.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I finally did see it later, I'm I can tolerate this now. As a kid, I can't imagine what I would have been going through my head. But yeah, we kind of knew I guess people aren't turning up for this one, but that, like I said, sequels tended to be a kind of a dicey proposition back then, especially for something like The Fly, which had been a Cronenberg movie with two huge stars in it, or fairly big stars.
Yeah, definitely upcoming stars. And actually, you got to remember, by the time they did The Fly 2 as well, actually Gina Davis, a lot more than Goldblum, was a huge star at this point.
Oh, I think that was her Accidental Tourist year.
Yeah. I mean, she was basically the female kind of De Niro around this time,
Yeah. And yeah, so it was just a completely different set of circumstances, and it definitely felt like, who wants to show up for the cheap sequel? And people just didn't turn up except for us. But I mean, it didn't. What I do remember is walking out and kind of talking with my brother and his friends about it. It's a superhero movie, blah blah blah. But they were like, well, it was way less gross than the first one. And so I had in my head that the first one was going to just make me puke in my pants. And it's gross. It's Cronenberg, but I could have handled it.
I don't agree with that. I would say this is more gory. I think the tone of the first one is darker and more menacing, because it's almost like the first one is a lot more serious, whereas this one's not played for laughs, but it's more like we said, like you said perfectly, it's more like a superhero movie, really.
Yeah.
So there's some great stuff in this, like the head getting squashed by the elevator and stuff.
I was about to bring that up. Literally was about to bring that up as soon as I could figure out a way to bring it in.
Yeah. It's gone Verhoeven. It's gone full Verhoeven.
Yeah, it was totally unnecessary, and it's also not how elevators work. But
also the guy's laying there for about 5 minutes. Help! I can't move my legs. It's like,
it was a really strange scene. I was like, well, just ball up into a little ball and don't put your head right where the elevator is going to land. Because anyway.
Yeah. Just time out. Well, this also, the script was, so Mick Garris had a hand in the script. And then also, because I think Cronenberg did the first script of The Flyers, the Goldblum one. But this was Mick Garris, a couple of other guys. And actually, one of his first scripts, Frank Darabont. Although, to be honest, watching this and watching The Blob's very witty, very kind of dark humor. That feels a lot more like Darabont. So I'm not sure how much work he actually did on this. I wouldn't be surprised if it was only the old kind of sentence here and there.
I bet the dog was Darabont.
Yeah.
I don't know that much about the guy, except for he knows how to really kind of twist the knife. Yeah. And so it's a really easy thing to do, right? I mean, making a dog miserable on screen. They have a whole site dedicated to it, and it's part of my wife's movie watching strategy. And I get it. You know, it's effective, and it works. And I was, I don't know if any of the rest of these guys went on to write anything, great, but know he was adapting. We did a couple Halloweens ago. We did The Mist.
Yeah.
Which is, I've tried to rewatch it since. I'm just like, oh my God, this movie. Now that I know what's happening, usually with horror, it's the other way. It's like, I know what's going to happen. It's fine. With that one, I'm like, no, I know what's going to happen. I can't watch this.
Oh yeah. The last 10 minutes of that, it's like a slap in the face. That's ruined many a date night, The Mist. But no, I like I say, I've watched this now through kind of pretty heavy nostalgia goggles, but I appreciate it for what it is. I can definitely see its flaws. It's definitely not. It's literally half the film. The first one is, but I think there's enough stuff left in there. I like how they respect and carry on from the original. Which, I think sequels used to do a lot more. I think these days, the urge is to completely reboot and almost throw away, the previous film. But I like how this still has the telepods, still puts in the footage of Goldblum, still has Bartok Industries. Yeah, it's got a lot of connective tissue. And, it's a solid sequel. I'd say it's kind of like a Jaws 2, really.
Yeah, I'd be curious, had this done well, to know what they might have thought of for a third film. I think there's a lot of places to go. Because the characters do in this one walk away. But they've also now got this technology and they know a lot more. So, what could you potentially do? I mean, it could have gotten very silly. It could have been like Aliens, like we're going to do a fly army.
Well, apparently, so in the 90s for a long time, I guess when she was like top of the tree for a while, like A-list, Gina Davis kept saying she wanted to do a Fly Part 3. Yeah, I don't know if she wanted to star in it or produce it, but she was kind of like in interviews talking about, that as a real possibility for a while, wanting to get that off the ground. And obviously that never happened. And if she was going to retrocon it, so, her character would be back in it somehow. But then also I kind of read the other day that some guy wrote The Fly Outbreak, which is like an unofficial Part 3 that carries on with the story of Martin Brundle afterwards. And I think you can buy that in a comic form. I've heard some reviews saying it's like an excellent third part, and some people saying it's terrible. So I don't know what to believe. I'm not in a rush to read it, I'll be honest, unless I find it very cheap. But yeah, I think I kind of think this is a good part 2. I think, you could do a lot worse than watch these two as a double bill around Halloween.
Yeah, I do think it would be, this would be a good one kind of leading up to Halloween, The Fly would be a good one as you're kind of getting into kind of the spirit of the season. And this is kind of like when you're actually on like Halloween night and things are a little lighter. This would be a good kind of exit one.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I'm not, as I've been hearing from Mike Bell from the other podcast frequently, I'm not mad at it. It was, it set out to do something, and I enjoyed watching it again.
Yeah. Did you see the in-joke with Cronenberg? The security guard reading the Cronenberg book, The Shape of Rage?
Okay. I didn't know that was his book. I was like, what? I meant to Google it later, but I started watching the movie again, and I completely forgot. Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, you had a few callbacks in there, like, Martin catching the fly, like, Goldblum did in the first film. And also, like, he had a very similar kind of line where she said, "What are you working on?" And he said, "The most important invention in the history of mankind," which I think Goldblum said, something that's going to change mankind, or is going to change the world as we know it.
Yeah.
So there's lots of little callbacks, but But yeah, and actually, I'll tell you what we haven't talked about. You know, John Getz. You know, he has a great little cameo. Because I guess he's the only real person left from the original film that turns up. But he has a great little scene that I'm sure was great fun for him because you know he gets a cameo, he gets a great kind of speech, and he probably got a good payday just for a couple of days' work there.
You know, it's funny because I hadn't seen the first movie when I saw this the first time. But I didn't feel like I needed anything explained to me. It all seemed pretty clear. That scene really stuck with me for some reason over the years of like, here's somebody who knew your parents and they were deeply impacted by whatever they were up to. And you're showing up kind of like this babe in the woods, kind of asking. One, he doesn't help them, right? I mean, and usually in movies, that's the point of a scene like that is, well, let's run down to my lab and I'll patch you up or whatever, or run tests and give you some information. All he does is go, you know what, take my car.
Well, he kind of also says, you know, because he's kind of a dick, like he was in the first film. But I like how the through line is same as the first film. He's kind of like almost like the whore with the heart of gold, you know. He like says, look, you know, get out of my house. I hated your dad. But I will tell you his solution was something to do with the telepods. So that's your only hope, really.
He provides information. There's a point to the scene, but I was I think when I saw it the first time as a kid, I was just so like shocked that they'd gone to, because in other movies, when you go find the old guy, whether it's War Games or whatever, like that's usually the beginning of the solution. And
that's true.
He gives them enough of a breadcrumb to get them going. Yeah. But he's also like, your mom left me for your dad, like all this history that suddenly 5-year-old Martin Brundle's having to deal with. Because it's only 5 years ago. For him, it's all super fresh, right?
Yeah. It's also information that he already knows, because he already knows that solution. And he's saying, I can't do that because somebody else would have to suffer.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I thought, it was like you didn't need to have that scene in the movie, but emotionally, I thought it worked pretty well. And that's kind of maybe what's missing from The Fly 2 more than anything, is it's so plot driven. Is it doesn't have those great character moments that the entire first movie is character moments.
You cared about the cast in the first one, I think, all three of them, I think. I mean, that's, what I liked was the fact that, with John Getz, he did have an arc where he was like the jealous boyfriend, but then he kind of became the hero by the end, even though he was kind of also the villain. And you didn't have anything really approaching that in this one. Everybody was very cookie cutter, Yeah. But like I say, I still recommend it. You could do a lot worse. I mean, the fact that, when you said, originally several weeks ago, can you come up with any sequels that maybe deserve reevaluation? This was one that sprang to mind for me,
Yeah, I was glad you brought it up. I will say, just as a word of warning, which you probably already know, I don't know, but it's not streaming anywhere right now, which is weird.
Yeah. We had a kind of Mission Impossible type situation to get it to you, didn't we?
Yeah. I was like I figured out, I was like, thinking, I'll just get on Amazon streaming and I'll just pay my $3.99 and watch it. And realized I just watched, it wasn't anywhere. It's like nowhere. And which is, it's like you said, it's a 20th Century Fox movie. I would think Disney has bought them. They're being super weird. Everyone knows that.
Yeah.
And right now, this is just a title that hasn't cleared whatever hurdle that they need to clear. And so right now, sorry, but and it only has been out on Blu-ray, I think, in that big Fly collection, in maybe in a 2 movie collection that came out maybe like 12 years ago or something like that. Yeah. So it's really hard to find.
Yeah, I do have that big Fly box set, and the one I actually gave to you was like, Yeah, from almost 20 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Like an old DVD. So, I mean, I haven't actively looked for it, obviously, for a while, but it's funny how some films kind of like, suddenly like disappear for a while.
Yeah, I have no idea what's going on. It'll, I'm sure, now that Shout has the rights to publish it, and they may, now that they've done the set, they may do them as individual films. Who knows? I hope they do. But yeah, I mean, originally too, I should mention, you're like, we're doing The Fly too, and I thought you'd meant The Return of the Fly, and I was like, man, I haven't even watched the original Fly in like 20 years. I've got to watch 2 movies, which was going to be a pleasure. But I do now. I have this thing in my head of in October, I'm definitely watching the 2 original Fly movies.
Well, yeah, and that box set is worth getting because I think you can pick it up for about $40 now, and yeah, you get like 5 Fly movies in there. And also the rare side of Vincent Price not playing the villain, but just kind of being a concerned bystander, really.
Yeah, which is every time I catch bits of The Fly on TV, I'm like, wait, he's not the Fly? What is his part here? Oh, right, he's just there.
Yeah,
which is I think maybe kind of similar to what it was in The Tingler, but
yeah. Yeah, he's almost like the kind of narrator. He's like kind of like the exposition dump for the audience, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I can't think of anything else to say.
No, I think I'm trying to think if there's anything to say. Daphne Zuniga's hair is fantastic. It's very 80s-tastic. You can enjoy that.
Big hair.
Yeah, it's very big hair.
Tasers are obviously something new because they get a lot of mileage out of those.
Yeah, tasers don't make people fly across the room, but we didn't know that in '89 yet. So anyway, yeah. Happy Halloween, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this series. Like Simon said, we're going to start talking about Christmas pretty much immediately. So right on the heels of this, I guess start looking for holiday movies. And I hope you have a good spooky Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Bye.
Bye.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.